matter of minutes. I mean,
Right.
so that's really what it is. It's a gigantic, VMware server cluster. And there's a lot more that goes into it. It's not just a VMware server cluster. There's a lot more stuff involved here. But basically, when you take it down to brass tacks, that's what it is. It's a giant virtual machine cluster network. Now, with that said, giving internet speeds and the kind of stuff that we have nowadays, it's for some corporations and some companies, it's just not practical. Some people still rely on thick client, database applications, utilizing SQL Server, sending images and that kind of thing over the internet in a thick client format. Just wouldn't be practical right now. As internet speeds increase, Fios has made a big splash in the market now. Cable's trying very hard to compete with those speeds. So, I think in the next 5 years, we'll probably see speeds in your house or in your place of business up to a true gigabit per second. Until we get there, cloud computing is going to be kind of relegated to things like web servers, stuff that you don't necessarily have to host in your office anymore. But traditional servers still have a place in the business environment, mainly due to connectivity issues and things like that. That and data backup, data security.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because especially when you're looking at a lot of different cloud providers out there, the verbiage when you talking about backups gets pretty dicey at times. Okay, just exactly what their policy is and who is truly responsible for data recovery in the event there is some kind of catastrophic loss. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the big thing I think that's making people really hesitant about adopting cloud computing for core business use is the kind of that vanilla language that they use to describe their backup. And yeah, there's a lot of doubt there. If you have data that cannot be reproduced, then that data is very, very valuable. People spend tens of thousands of dollars a month backing up essential data. So that is a real concern. How do we back up our data and get it onto a physical media, such as tape, a disk, or something else? That way we have it should something catastrophic occur. We still have our irreplaceable data. So I think that too is another thing that people are kind of gun shy about. If you've ever lost data in the past, it's a horrible experience, and especially if you can't, right? Then you're really screwed. There's nothing you're going to be able to do to get it back. And so I think that's going to kind of hold back the cloud computing, to take over traditional server roles in business environment.
I'm using the Amazon S3 service to back up my photos, my music, our company documents, all that. Because I use the, what I did, Jim? I got tired of fooling around with the domain.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I got tired of the constant patching and the responsibility, I guess, for the lack of a better term, of maintaining a Windows Server environment. And it was just overkill for me for a lot of things. So, I simplified. I said, what the hell with it? I don't really need it. Why not get a Windows Home Server, which I did. And it's got some excellent built-in tools. By the way, it's a great little small business server. It can be. If you don't need the sophisticated type of security that a Windows, full-fledged Active Directory controller and all that's going to require, which I don't. I don't need that. And it's questionable that a lot of small businesses really need that level of stuff, right? I mean, isn't it kind of ridiculous to walk into a small company, I'm talking 5-10 employees, and see, like small business servers sitting there and an Exchange server, or, here's a Windows server and an email server and all that. Isn't that just kind of nuts?
Well, so don't get me started on Windows Small Business Server. It's a fallacy. Yeah, Windows, Microsoft is a company, and all of us MCSE engineers, as we are learning and are raised up throughout the Microsoft ranks, are taught about data redundancy and server redundancy, load balancing. There's a couple of things you should never do in the Microsoft world. And one is mix a domain controller with a SQL Server or an Exchange. But guess what? Your small business server mixes all three together.
It sure does.
And and then they throw in SharePoint and IIS. And so
no, not anymore, Jim. They don't do the IIS thing now.
But
That's funny,
it's really a stupid way to put all your company's eggs in one basket, and that's really what the SBS server is. And it's just Microsoft's way of selling their products to a smaller market for price, because their prices on some of the stuff is just downright outrageous.
Well, I think the idea with small business server, of course, is because if the guy who bought a small business server seen the actual price of buying Exchange and then buying the cows and then buying SQL Server and buying the cows and all this stuff, they're really getting one hell of a sweet deal initially.
Oh, they are.
All right, right? But you're getting them locked in to Microsoft technologies. They're getting all their data into this format. And, of course, that's the idea. And when you hit, they say that, you can have up to 75 users on a small business server. But realistically, when you hit over about maybe 40, 50 in that range of users, you probably need to be getting them onto a separate email server, and separate out your domain controller, start separating all these out, and suddenly that little server you paid a couple grand for is nothing compared to what you're facing going into a standard Windows environment.
Yeah, especially with an Exchange, because the small business server, the Exchange that they ship is very limited in the mailbox store size. So, and I can't recall exactly what it is. It's somewhere in the range of 40 gig, I think. They might have raised it. I'm talking about Windows Server 2003.
All right.
After you hit that limit, there's no expanding it. So if you have 75 users and you send a lot of email, you're going to hit that limit pretty quick. And after you hit that limit, your Exchange just stops working. It doesn't.
Right.
You would throw up flags and complain. It just downright ceases to function. And then, then you're spending a lot of money and having engineers come out and migrating the Exchange over to a new Exchange server.
Okay, and what does that cost? What does an engineer going to charge you just in labor per hour to migrate an Exchange server over to, say in that scenario, to a standalone install?
It really depends on the area you live and stuff. The network engineers here in Pittsburgh, our rate, going rate is $125 an hour. So with a decent sized Exchange, migration, you would if I were to give you a quote to do this, I'd say probably about 16 hours worth of labor. So 16 hours at $125 an hour.
Right, we're over $2,000.
Yeah,
easy.
Plus the licensing costs for the software, plus the hardware costs for hardware to run it.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, by the way, you have to have another Microsoft Windows Server license to run Exchange off of.
That's right.
So, you can easily see this costing you $600.
Now, there was a question, and this is kind of interesting to me. Now, I was convinced I knew the answer to this before I talked to Microsoft, but there's no guarantee even those guys know what they're talking about when you even call Microsoft for assistance with licensing. And here was the question. Okay, so I want a Exchange server, and I want to support, let's say, 25 users, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that we have to have Microsoft Windows Server to run Exchange Server.
Yep.